Rory McIlroy boycotts, Rolap's 2028 postseason mandate, and the media has erupted. This isn't clickbait. The six-time major champion just publicly declared war on the PGA Tour's new CEO, and the fallout is already reshaping professional golf. And honestly, the pure arrogance of it makes my blood boil. Regular golf fans are struggling to afford greens fees at their local munis, yet these country club elites are revolting because they might have to play a few extra tournaments. It is the most tone-deaf display of entitlement I've ever seen from professional golf, proving these spoiled athletes care about nothing but their own convenience, while the rest of us just want to watch the best players compete. But look past the outrage. Rory McIlroy isn't just being difficult, he's exposing a fundamental flaw in Brian Rolapp's master plan. The new CEO from the NFL is trying to force-feed American-style playoffs onto a global sport, and McIlroy realizes this 2028 postseason mandate is a brilliant trap designed to shift all the control away from the players and directly onto the tour executives. Let me show you how this works, and how one man's rebellion could bring the whole system down. Personally, I think McIlroy is absolutely right to push back. Do you agree? Or do you think he's being a prima donna? Drop it below. And if no one in golf media is asking the real questions, that's exactly what this channel is for. Subscribe. So who is Brian Rolapp, and what did he actually propose that made the six-time major champion go to war? Brian Rolapp didn't come from golf. He came from the NFL, where he ran media operations and helped turn Sunday football into an American institution. He spent years negotiating billion-dollar broadcast deals, managing relationships with networks, and figuring out how to maximize revenue for the league. When the PGA Tour needed a new CEO in 2026, they didn't look for a golf guy. They looked for a corporate guy. Rolapp fit the bill perfectly. When he looked at professional golf, he saw the same problems he'd seen in the NFL. Too many events, too much guaranteed status, too little scarcity. His solution? Make it harder, make it more exclusive, force the best players to compete more often. Scarcity creates value, he said. In his mind, if you only see the best players a few times a year, those moments become special. If every week is a full field event with 156 players, nothing stands out. He started with small changes. Field sizes dropped from 156 to 144 players. Smaller events shrank from 132 to 120. Fully exempt tour cards were slashed from 125 to 100, meaning 25 players lost guaranteed status. The tour blamed pace of play. Nobody believed that for a second, but those changes were just the warm-up. In June 2026, the PGA Tour ratified the most sweeping reform since 1968. Rolapp called it a pivotal moment. He wrote to fans framing it as progress, but the players read that letter and saw a power grab. His plan turned professional golf upside down, but what Rolapp proposed next made even his allies nervous. Starting in 2028, the PGA Tour would split into two tiers. The Championship Series, the top tier, would have about 23 events per year with 120 players and $20 million purses. The Challenger Series, the second tier, would have at least 20 events with 144 players and $4 million purses. Then came promotion and relegation. Finish at the bottom of the Championship Series, you drop down. Finish at the top of the Challenger Series, you move up. Rolapp compared it to the English Premier League. In theory, it creates drama. In practice, it creates fear. One bad season, one injury, one cold week with the putter, and suddenly you're playing for $4 million instead of 20. Think about what that means for a player who's been on tour for 10 or 15 years. They've built a life, they've bought houses, they've planned their families around a certain level of income, and now one bad stretch of golf could cut their earnings by 80%. That's not just a pay cut, that's a career-altering event. The psychological pressure alone would be immense. Every shot matters more. Every missed cut carries heavier consequences. The game becomes not just about winning, but about survival. The postseason was also overhauled. Rolapp wanted match play elements, more unpredictability, and rotating venues for the Tour Championship. No sponsor exemptions would be allowed in Championship Series events. You had to earn your spot. On paper, it sounded like progress, but the players didn't see it that way. And no one was louder about it than Rory McIlroy. Rory's response wasn't just criticism, it was a declaration of war. Rory McIlroy has won 6 major championships and the FedEx Cup 3 times. When he speaks, people listen. He's measured and thoughtful, but when he calls something out, he does it with precision. In June 2026, ahead of the US Open, he delivered a line that became the headline of the golf world. Track 2 is a glorified Corn Ferry event, he said. That's what Track 2 is going to be. The Corn Ferry Tour is the development tour, the minor leagues. McIlroy had just declared that Rollap's system was creating a minor league for players who couldn't make the cut. Then he gave a devastating example. An event like last week, the Canadian Open, potentially going to one of these Track 2s. So I don't think the Canadian Open should be one of those. The Canadian Open dates back to 1904. McIlroy won it twice. Now Rolap's system could relegate it to a secondary event. You can't call yourself a National Open anymore if it's a closed-off tournament, McIlroy warned. National Opens were supposed to be open. Anyone could qualify. Anyone could dream. That's what made them special. That's what gave them their character. Rolap's system closed that door. McIlroy's warning went deeper than just the Canadian Open. He was talking about the Scottish Open, the Irish Open, all the national championships that have been part of golf's fabric for over a century. If those tournaments become closed events for a select group of players, they lose their meaning. They become just another corporate product. And that, McIlroy argued, was a betrayal of everything golf stands for. But Rory's words were just the beginning. His actions told a far more damning story. Starting in 2025, McIlroy began changing his schedule. He skipped the first FedEx Cup playoff event despite being healthy. He admitted he just didn't feel like playing. He wanted more balance in his life. In 2026, he played only 11 PGA Tour events for the entire season, including the 4 majors. To maintain your membership, you need at least 15. McIlroy was daring the tour to penalize him. At the FedEx St. Jude Championship, he shot +8. Afterward, he admitted, obviously didn't come in here with a ton of reps. Swing wasn't in sync and obviously didn't do a ton of practice. He hadn't played a competitive round in 4 weeks. He was sending a message. He would play on his terms. If that meant losing or sabotaging his FedEx Cup chances, he was okay with that. I'll pick and choose my spots, he said. It makes it harder for myself to win the FedEx Cup. Absolutely. But I'm okay with that because it brings balance to my life. Balance, not greed, not ego. He wasn't refusing to play because he hated the money. He was refusing because he hated being told when to show up. This is the key distinction that most people miss. McIlroy isn't against playing more golf. He's against being forced to play more golf on someone else's schedule. He's a 6-time major champion. He's earned the right to decide when and where he competes. Rolap's system takes that right away. And for a player of McIlroy's stature, that's not just an inconvenience, it's an insult. Was Rory alone in this fight? Matt Fitzpatrick's answer was clear. Matt Fitzpatrick, who won the US Open in 2022, publicly backed McIlroy. He called the current playoff format a bit weird. He argued the player who performs best all season should be rewarded, not the one who gets hot for 3 weeks. I think the player who has played the best all year from January to the Tour Championship deserves to be the FedEx Cup champion, Fitzpatrick said. He pointed to Colin Morikawa as an example. Morikawa had an incredible season. He won big events. He was the best player for most of the year. But under the current format, a few bad playoff rounds could cost him everything. Fitzpatrick thought that was wrong, and he thought Rolap's new system made it even worse. Fitzpatrick's support proved the rebellion wasn't just one superstar throwing a tantrum. It was a genuine divide between the players and the people running the tour. But while Fitzpatrick backed Rory, Lucas Glover delivered a different kind of warning. Lucas Glover has been on tour for nearly 2 decades and won the US Open in 2009. When Rolap cut field sizes, the tour blamed pace of play. Glover called that explanation insulting. He knew pace of play wasn't the issue. Control was the issue. Fewer players meant more scarcity, meant more value for broadcast partners. Glover is a veteran. He's seen the tour change over the years. He's seen the money grow, the fields get stronger, the courses get tougher. But he's never seen anything like this. For the first time in his career, he feels like the tour is actively working against the players. And he's not afraid to say it. But the ball rollback lit the real fuse. Justin Thomas went nuclear. Justin Thomas didn't hold back. His words cut deep. When the USGA and R&A announced that starting in 2028, professional golfers would use a ball that traveled 15 to 20 yards shorter, Thomas called it selfish and bad for the game. Then he asked, "Are you going to make the mile longer so the fastest mile time doesn't change?" Are you going to raise the NBA hoop because players can jump higher? His point was simple. Golf evolves. Players get stronger. Equipment gets better. Courses get updated. Why artificially restrict the ball? It's like telling baseball players they can't use aluminum bats. It's like telling sprinters they can't use modern shoes. The game should move forward, not backward. Bryson DeChambeau went even further, calling it the most atrocious, uninspiring thing you could possibly do to golf. DeChambeau built his entire game around distance. He changed his body, his swing, his equipment, all to hit the ball further. Now the governing bodies were telling him his approach was wrong. All that work, all that sacrifice, and for what? To be told that the thing he worked hardest for is now illegal. So Rory is against the mandate, JT and Bryson are furious about the rollback, Fitzpatrick and Glover are piling on. But one voice has been strangely quiet, and his silence might tell you more than any quote. Tiger Woods said almost nothing for months. He was dealing with personal issues, a DUI arrest, treatment overseas, but when he finally reappeared, his position was clear. Woods is the future chairman of the competition committee. He helped create these reforms. Standing beside Rolap in June 2026, he said, "This work was never about any one player or person. It was about bringing together different perspectives, having honest, hard conversations, and thinking boldly about what is best for the game. No criticism, no resistance." He backed the establishment. If Tiger Woods supports the changes, how can anyone argue? But here's the irony. Woods could always dictate his own schedule. He played when he wanted, where he wanted. He wasn't forced into anything. Now he's helping design a system that forces other players into a rigid structure. The establishment had spoken. But Brian Rolapp wasn't done yet. His response to Rory's criticism told you everything. Rolap addressed McIlroy's criticism head-on. "I had the chance to speak to Rory today," he said. "We talked a bit about it, but he didn't back down. He defended the Challenger Series. If you look at the Challenger Series events, they'll be at venues you recognize. They'll be for healthy purses. They'll include a subset of the same 200 and change players that we have today. That is much different than what the Corn Ferry Tour is today." His final message: "We think we've just organized the same tour into a much more interesting and competitive system." He was standing his ground. Rolap wouldn't compromise. McIlroy wouldn't back down. The sport was caught in the middle. What Rolap didn't say was perhaps more telling than what he did say. He didn't address McIlroy's concern about national opens. He didn't explain why a tournament like the Canadian Open should be relegated. He just defended the system. That silence spoke volumes. Rolap drew his line. But with the 2026 US Open just weeks away, the real question was, could Rory's rebellion actually work? The US Open at Shinnecock Hills added another layer. Shinnecock is brutal. In 2018, Brooks Koepka won at 1 over par. Players walked off calling it broken and unfair. Now the same governing body McIlroy was fighting, the USGA, was hosting the championship there. McIlroy has never won at Shinnecock. The pressure was immense. And think about the irony. McIlroy is fighting against a system that forces players to play more events. But the US Open is the one event he would never skip. It's the major championship that has eluded him for his entire career. And now it's being hosted by the very organization he's publicly criticizing. If he wins, he silences his critics. If he loses, the governing bodies get to say, "See, the system works." Either way, the stakes couldn't be higher. And that brings us to the moment we've been building toward. The final showdown between Rory McIlroy and Brian Rolap. Rolap's system arrives in 2028. The battle lines are drawn. McIlroy has made his position clear. Rolap has made his position clear. Players are picking sides. The media is covering it like a war. What happens next? Does McIlroy skip events? Continue his soft boycott? Walk away entirely? Start his own rebel tour? Some insiders have suggested that McIlroy could follow the LIV golf model, create his own circuit with his own rules. He has the name recognition. He has the sponsors. He has the fan base. If he walked away from the PGA Tour, he could take a significant portion of the viewing audience with him. That's the nightmare scenario for Rolap. That's what keeps him up at night. Rolap has a different concern. If the biggest star refuses to play the system, the entire value proposition collapses. Broadcast partners pay billions for exclusive access to the best players. If McIlroy isn't playing the mandatory events, contracts get renegotiated. Sponsors pull out. The whole thing could collapse. That's the irony. Rolap created a system to maximize control and value. But he pushed the most valuable asset, Rory McIlroy, to the edge of rebellion. If McIlroy leaves, the system fails. If he stays and fights, the system fails. Rolap only wins if McIlroy surrenders. There's no evidence that's happening. So here we are. One man, one CEO, one mandate, and a sport caught in the middle. The real question isn't who's right or who's wrong. It's whether the game we all love will ever be the same again. Rory McIlroy picked a fight with the most powerful executive in golf. The next 18 months will tell us who wins. And trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends.